He's just politicking,
He's not
just so
hearing.
good.
And you got the nerve to talk about me? It's 6 o'clock.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 6 o'clock on the nose right now, so we'll go ahead and officially bring our meeting to order. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, would you please take all cell phones and any mechanical devices and turn them to the silent position, if you will, please. And with that being said, Ms. James, would you please call the roll of the council?
Yes, the Honorable Mayor Pro Tem Linda J. Davis,
Present.
the Honorable Ulysses Smallwood,
Present.
the Honorable Pat Palin, the Honorable James Whitmore, the Honorable Hattie Portis Jones,
Present.
Honorable Alex Heath.
Present.
Thank you so much. Mr. City Administrator, you want to go ahead and go to the first item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our presentation for this afternoon work session is on mental health, and I will turn things over to Ms. Champagne, our Human Resources Director.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. We stand here before you tonight to provide a presentation as it relates to mental health awareness relating to collaboration with our public safety, with our community, and also with our city personnel. I do want to, before we get into the presentation, take an opportunity to introduce our mental health discussion presenters. The first one would be our Chief, Anthony Batitlo. He is a Georgia Post certified general instructor, and he serves as our Chief of Police here with the City of Fairburn. We also have Chief Cornelius Robertson. He is a Georgia Fire Academy general instructor, and he serves as our Fire Chief here with the City of Fairburn. We have a guest presenter here tonight, which is Ms. Pamela Braxton. She is a licensed clinical social worker and is the community outreach coordinator therapist for the Odyssey Family Counseling Center. And then lastly, myself, I'm Talisha Champagne. I'm a certified professional in human resources, and I serve here as the Human Resources Director. Tonight's objective for this presentation is we want to first start by providing you the definition of mental health, talk to you a little bit about as it relates to mental health diagnosis, also explain a little bit about what the stigma is as it relates to mental health. We're going to provide you tools as it relates to coping skills, which includes self-care. Public safety here tonight, we'll talk a little bit about kind of their role and how they assist as it relates to mental health situations in our community. I will end as it relates to discussing mental health here with our wellness program and as we collaborate with our city personnel. And then we'll conclude by just providing some mental health resources, not just for our council members here tonight, but for any of our community members who may be viewing the discussion on tonight. So the first person I would like to call up to start our discussion off is Ms. Pamela Braxton.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for the opportunity for me to present in front of you. My name is Pam Braxton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker at Odyssey Family Counseling Center. We're located in College Park, and we provide counseling services for children as young as 4 years old. We work with teenagers and adults, and we provide therapy virtually and in person. So I'm going to start with just a general definition of what mental health is. So mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It helps determine how we handle stress, how we relate to other people, how we make choices. So there are many factors that contribute to our mental health. So biological factors such as genes or brain chemistry. So certain mental health conditions have a hereditary component, meaning they can be passed down through genes from one generation to the next. Life experiences such as trauma or abuse or environment. Family environment can have a profound impact on mental health. Growing up in a family with high stress or trauma or abuse or neglect or substance abuse can increase the risk of mental health issues. And family history. Individuals with a family history of mental health disorders such as depression, bipolar, anxiety, have a higher risk of developing these conditions themselves. So that's just a generalized overview of what mental health is. So I want to talk about some of the common diagnoses that you've probably heard of. And the first one is depression. So I'm sure we've all heard of that. So basically the symptoms of depression include sadness, isolation, feelings of tearfulness, emptiness, hopelessness, angry outbursts, and irritability. Lots of times people don't know that that is a symptom of depression, being irritable or frustrated, even over small matters. A loss of interest or pleasure in doing most normal activities, sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, eating too much, not eating enough. We're tired, we don't have energy, we feel worthless, guilty, we're fixating on the past, we're blaming ourselves for things that we're not responsible for. And also there are thoughts sometimes of suicide or self-harm. So these are all symptoms of depression. So a cousin of depression is anxiety. So anxiety includes fear, panic, uneasiness. We're not sleeping. We're not able to be calm or to be still. Some physical symptoms could be cold, sweaty, numb, tingling hands or feet, shortness of breath, heart palpitations, dry mouth, tense muscles, dizziness. This is anxiety. I look at anxiety as the fear of the future. We're fixated on things that haven't even happened yet. And you might have heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So that develops when a person has difficulty recovering after experiencing or witnessing a terrifying event. So you're talking about some type of abuse, a car crash, robbery. You know, you think about veterans who may have served in a war. So we are re-experiencing the trauma, recurrent involuntary intrusive memories, nightmares, daydreams, flashbacks, avoidance of the places that remind us of the event, talking about the event. We're irritable, we're aggressive, we're hypervigilant. We have problems concentrating and problems sleeping. Bipolar or mood disorder. So basically you think of high highs or low lows. So we're talking about the moods are fluctuating. So I talked about depression, but then there's also feelings of mania. Mania is increased energy or activity, restlessness, euphoric, extremely irritable, racing thoughts, jumping from one idea to the next, distractibility, again, little sleep. And they deny anything is wrong. This is normal. And lastly, I want to talk about ADHD, which we see a lot of times in our children. And adults can also have an ADHD diagnosis, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So it's an ongoing pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity or impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. So inattention. So we're talking about people having problems staying on task. They can't focus. They can't get organized. And it's not because of lack of comprehension or defiance. It's just very difficult for them to be able to pay attention. Hyperactivity, that means someone that's moving constantly, including situations where it's not appropriate. Excessive fidgeting, tapping, talking. Kids can't stay in their seats in school. Impulsivity. People thinking, acting without thinking, or having a problem with self-control. It can include a desire for immediate rewards and the inability to delay gratification, impulsive, I need it right now. So I want to talk a little bit about, and I know I'm going fast, I want to talk a little bit about the stigma. As a community outreach coordinator, I go out all throughout South Fulton, and I go to different health fairs and presentations. And lots of times in the South Fulton and other communities, there's a lot of mental health stigma, right? When society places shame on people who live with a mental illness or seek help for emotional distress, such as anxiety, depression, bipolar, PTSD. A lot of us experience anxiety and depression, right? So, but the stigma is when people place shame on other people who may want to get help. So a lot of people don't engage in mental health services because, it's this saying, I'm not crazy, or I'm not weak, or, it's a waste of money, or we all have depression. Why would I waste my time? I just deal with it. I pray on it, which there's nothing wrong with prayer. That's only for rich people. That's only for those people. Well, you don't have friends that you got to pay. I've heard that. You don't have friends, you got to pay somebody to be your friend. Or the therapists tell you what to do, or they're all up in your business. So these are reasons why people don't seek mental health services. And so one of the things that I talk about with my clients in how to manage anxiety and depression is to use coping skills. So these are strategies and techniques that individuals use to effectively deal and manage the stress, the challenges, the difficult emotions. So these skills can improve overall well-being and resiliency in the face of adversity. Real simple. Exercise, eating healthy, drinking lots of water, getting lots of sleep. That's real simple. That will help your mental health. Fun things that you want to do for yourself and your family, meditation, deep breathing, we talk about that. Surround yourself with positive people and good people. We can do a vision board, we can listen to music, hot showers and baths, new hobbies, prayer, laughing. That's a really good coping skill. One coping skill I want to talk about before I end is self-care. I talk a lot about self-care. And basically all that is caring for yourself, simply being nice to yourself, doing something nice for yourself. It can mean being aware of your psychological, physical, social, emotional, spiritual needs and following through on tending to those needs. It can also, it can include relaxing and enjoyable events, but sometimes not so much. Sometimes we have to set boundaries with people. We have to have difficult conversations with people. We have to say no and stand up and be assertive for something you believe in and be honest about your feelings and break old patterns. Self-care at work, take breaks, advocate for yourself, ask a colleague to help because burnout can impact the quality of your work. So preventing burnout and prioritizing self-care is ethical and a professional responsibility. Again, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does any member of council have any questions regarding this?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Ms. Shaw.
I appreciate your presentation, and it was very informative. My question to you, though, is the coping skills that you've identified, those are all very good. But my concern is that a lot of people don't know how to, they don't know the skills, or they don't know how to use those skills. So could you talk a little bit about bridging that gap, from the issues and the diagnosis to helping a person to actually implement some of those coping skills?
Well, thank you for that question. Mm-hmm. And you're right, that can be challenging. So one thing, like I said, I go out and I talk about mental health and what that is in the community. There are organizations that provide mental health first aid. If someone wants to just know basic information about mental health, kind of like what I just talked about, there are different helplines out there. I know at Odyssey, we provide school-based therapy. We're in about 5 or 6, maybe we're up to 10 South Fulton County schools, and we're talking about mental health with the children. Lots of times we do parent education through the schools, and so the parents are aware of our services. And like I said, lots of times mental health is everywhere, especially with COVID. A lot of people have been more interested, more apt to want to learn more about mental health services in churches or talking to your family. I know a lot of people Google, I don't feel right, or I'm feeling sad, what is this? And lots of times that's how a lot of people come to Odyssey, just by Googling mental health services in their community.
Okay, thank you for that. And Ms. Champlain, when the presentations are complete, if you can just tie it all together for us in terms of the benefits that we offer our employees, and how we communicate and just that entire process, if you would.
Yes, ma'am, we will. That'll actually be part of my slide.
Oh, fantastic, okay.
And there's a continued presentation, but what I'm gonna do, if you don't mind, I'm gonna give these two council members a question, then we're gonna go to the rest, because I want you, so we can holistically. Go ahead, Mr. Smart.
Well, thank you.
Thank
for your
you.
Presentation, and I was kind of piggybacking on your question and kind of giving an explanation with you as well, because I was in one of our local school systems, and you all were the people that came out. I was an administrator, so I am familiar with how you guys operate. I think then, to answer kind of, if I could, it's gonna be on us to really, really just acquaint the public with the resources are out there, but as she said, the stigma of getting mental health then plays a part, because as a elementary school administrator, what we would notice was you guys would come in, you were available, but it took a proactive piece then from the parents knowing that it's there, and then the help, you can get it, but that stigma came in. Unless it was a crisis situation where the student was maybe getting in a lot of trouble, getting suspended all of the time, then they say, hey, well, we need some help. But the help is there even before you get to that situation. And as you noted, this is something in our community that we say, oh, like you say, I'm not crazy, or all of that, but I remember being in a lot of those sessions because I worked hand in hand with our counselor, who you came out to the schools and dealt with, and it was really, really good because, it may not just be that, you're just getting additional support to talk about what you're going through. So I think it's one of those things that's really, really good right now, because all of us, kids, adults, are going through a lot, especially post-pandemic. So I think this is really, really a good presentation that's here today, because then we all have to do the job of making it known that it's available, and don't feel shame for trying to get some help, all right? Like I said, I think it was kind of I hear what you're saying, but I also understand what you're saying. From being in the schools, a lot of our people, we would call them and say, hey, the help is there, but it's certain steps they had to take to get the help that they say, no, I'm not gonna do that, unless it was, like I said, a crisis situation where the kid was getting in a lot of trouble. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Ms. Davis, and then we'll go back. Go ahead.
Okay. Two things that I was wondering about is the trends as it relates to our kids today and what we've been through with the isolation and the back and forth, being in school, out of school, working from home. Do you see where there's more of an uptick with our kids in reference to what all has transpired? And the other thing I wanted to ask about, oftentimes we are brought up in environments that we see our cousin or uncles or grandparents or whatever exhibit certain behaviors, and we may think that's normal. How can we teach them the difference between, even though you may have seen this most of your life, how people react in their behavior, but how do you get them for us to differentiate between that may be normal in your experience, but it's not really normal?
Okay.
You understand what?
I think I'm going to answer the first question first. Okay, so yes, with COVID, when kids were being homeschooled, there was a lot of isolation, and that's not good, because as people, support and being around others is extremely important. I know too, social media is a big thing with kids, the things that they see on social media. There's a lot of bullying going on and different TikToks and all that type of stuff. So yes, I would say when COVID happened, there was a lot of deaths, there was a lot of unknown, and I work primarily with the adults, but even with that, a lot of the children, you think that they're not paying attention, but they are. They don't have the same structure in the classrooms as they had before, especially if they were being taught online. So lots of times parents are paying attention but not really paying attention because they're probably working. And so, and sir, you say you were in the school, so you probably know this better than me. And so a lot of kids, they missed out on a lot, right? They missed their friends. We're social people. And so unfortunately that did happen, and that does kind of impact our kids. The second question, I kind of want you to go back again with the second question if you don't mind.
How can we teach those that think how they respond and their behavior is normal, because that's the way they were brought. They were in an environment, a home environment that people yelled at each other. They
Yeah.
cursed each other out. They threw temper tantrums.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And if they do those things and that's how they will react and their behavior, and they think, well, that's normal. Everybody do that.
Yeah.
You know, so how do you, like some of the things that you listed here, easily angered,
Yeah.
easily frustrated, don't have the patience or the fidgeting and the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So the first thing I would say is if it was my family member, I'd want to be educated. First of all, if I see these symptoms or if I see a family member that's irritated, agitated, isolating, what is that, right? So I would probably educate myself first. The next thing I would probably do is talk to that loved one, that uncle. Hey, this is what I see. I was kind of reading about some stuff, online. This is what I found out. What do you think about it? Now, we don't want to accuse or sound negative, so we want to offer gentle support, right? This is what I see, and then educate them, and then also to let them know, hey, there's help out there if you want to be able to manage some of this irritability, this stress, this anxiety that you have. There's help out there. If you like, I can go with you. We can get an assessment done. Or there's things that you can Google and do online. There's a depression assessment or an anxiety assessment. And if someone, if you find out that, hey, you do have high anxiety or depression, let's call someone. Let's talk to someone. There are hot helplines that you can call now. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay, and even from a clinical point of view, distinguishing the normal, because a professional person, if I'm
Okay, I see
coming
what
to
you're saying.
you as,
Yeah.
and like everybody does that, what's wrong with that?
In my opinion, if it interferes with normal everyday functioning. So yeah, sometimes people do get irritable or they get sad, but is it to the point where they're abusive? Is it to the point where they can't get out of bed? Is it to the point where, we're neglecting our children, when it gets to that point? Because yeah, lots of times in our family, people do get angry and upset and lash out and things like that. But it's to the point clinically, I would say, is when it interferes with everyday functioning. Is that person abusive? Is that person hurtful? Is that person hurting the kids? Something, that's what I would say.
Okay,
And I can
thank you, I
piggyback on that
appreciate
just
it.
real quickly, because I know you have to go. So as she said, what we would do at the school level, if something happened that was beyond what should have happened in the school, we did what was called an assessment protocol, where you interview the student as well, you will interview the parents as well, and then you go through these particular factors, and then it was deemed after that protocol whether that was something out of the norm or was that something that was in the norm. So then that data gave you how to go next. So like I said, they're an entity, but then the school is an entity as well. So all entities, because they can't come into the schools and do those things without the schools being involved.
Yeah.
But like you say, if something happened at the school, then there was this deep assessment protocol. Now the kid and the parent had to be honest on it as well. And then you would know what you're kind of dealing with based on the answers from that
Right.
protocol.
Right.
Yep.
And I want to add to that too, not just the schools, but also in some hospitals, clinics, they're doing PHQ-9s where they ask people when they come in, hey, have you felt sad. I know when I went to the doctor, they automatically had the PHQ-9, which I knew was a depression scale. And if you scored a certain number, hey, we have these resources for you.
Yeah.
So I think other people, other entities are starting to see that mental health is important too. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Anything else?
No, we're gonna go to the next.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
So we'll tackle the public safety portion next. If we can go, there it is. So a couple of bullet points you see here, we'll kind of run through each one, and we'll kind of go back and forth a little bit. We both have kind of slightly different perspectives, of course, based on some of what we're talking about. The role of public safety in the community. On the PD side, number one is de-escalation. That's our first step. That's what we train on nowadays. Securing the scene, making sure that people, property, everything's okay, and the situation has gotten back under control. And let me jump in real quick here and say this is typically more of a crisis response. This is not your day-to-day mental health. Once PD gets involved, certainly we're probably at the crisis level. So this is more the extreme cases. And then finally, of course, making sure we provide assistance. Now, normally our first point of assistance would be, of course, the fire department. So
Usually, when we get the mental health calls, first things first, we do count on PD to be there to secure the scene before we engage with the patient. And in most cases, it goes smoothly, but there are times when it gets ugly and the situation escalates, and that's where PD comes in. Our calls have jumped tremendously over time with mental health. It comes from a lot of people being depressed. Like the doctor said, COVID, it took a toll on the country, it took a toll on our citizens here in Fairburn. But we do a lot of engaging with mental health, more so than just your regular medical calls. A lot of people get upset because they already have underlying issues or medical history on top of whatever else that they got going on, whether it's financially or death in the family, what have you.
our next bullet, public safety personnel training. On the PD side, the police department requires annual training for mental health and responding to mental health calls, persons in crisis. There's some more specialized training that we are working on getting additional officers. We have a handful certified already. The advanced crisis intervention training, it's a week-long 40-hour course that the officers can attend, and it's very much more detailed in terms of the training. Our policy is an annual requirement that our policy be reviewed on mental health calls and response to mental health, ranging from everything from making slight adjustments like the lights and siren, you know, instead of leaving them running the whole time. The lights and siren can be upsetting for folks. So especially if we have an advance notice that it's dealing with a person that's dealing with a crisis, we might turn those off a little bit sooner than we might otherwise. And then in terms of just dealing with the call and how you speak to somebody about raising your voice, lowering your voice, making those choices. So that's kind of the PD side of the training.
And I want to add to the fire side, really the public safety side, as far as the chief touched on the training for us. I want to give you all some factors that increase the mental health issues in public safety. One being previously in treatment for another disorder, like what I just talked about. Starting out as a firefighter or a police officer at a young age. Now, me and Chief, we're good, but that does happen. You have a lot of people that's been in the public safety for a long time, and it takes a toll on them. Mm-hmm. Some of them can't go home because they can't retire, because they started young, but they don't have the age, etc. Being unmarried. Most guys in public safety, you know, being married, it helps to have that loved one there to share your stories with or what have you. But you do have a lot of single public safety officials, and you know, they take on that stuff by themselves. They deal with divorce or what have you. Holding a supervisory rank in public safety. Any ranking position in public safety takes a toll on the individual. He's responsible for a lot. Me and Chief Azillo, of course, we have those guys in our lives, their lives in our hands every day. So, you know, you all expect for us to make the right decision and make sure everybody goes home safely. Proximity to death during a traumatic event. Me and Chief Azillo can share many stories out there on that interstate The streets here in Fairburn, we run up on a lot of stuff. It's nothing for the guys to go to multiple fights or shootings back to back. It's nothing for us to do a cardiac arrest and then work a major house fire back to back. And all of these factors lead to, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and in our case, for public safety, responder fatigue syndrome. And what we could do to help that, well, Chief, I don't want to get too far. Okay. Go ahead.
Third bullet point, responding to mental health calls. I touched on this just a moment ago, particularly about a subdued response. Some of the things we train on, number one, is, again, the tone of voice, the way an officer approaches somebody that is known to be going through some kind of mental health crisis. You want to turn down the aggression a little bit. There is a time when the police do need to be aggressive. I've always been real clear about that. But with a mental health crisis patient, that's somebody you need to turn it down a little bit. This is somebody who needs help, and you don't need to try to take control of the scene. You need to try to facilitate assistance, and that's a big thing that we train on. And again, response like that, the CAD entry is a big part, and we try to make sure the public's aware of that. If you've got someone who's got a known mental health issue, and there is a concern that, hey, this person might, have an episode, you can work with public safety, the police, the fire, and we can make notification to the Fulton County 911 Center, who we get our 911 services through, and they can actually make an entry in the CAD system. So, okay, I'm going to 123 Main Street. There's a person there, and public safety responding needs to know this person at this address has this thing going on, right? And that can kind of give public safety that advance notice. If we get a call there, this is what to expect, so we can kind of make sure we're approaching a situation properly from the get-go.
And to piggyback on Chief, there are things we can do that can help our citizens, our comrades, our employees with debriefing, individual intervention, EAP. Train peer support, that's a big part for our guys or our employees that suffer with mental illness. A lot of times they don't want to admit it, or they don't think they're in that situation, or they're suffering from that, but in a lot of cases you can tell. And resources for employee and their families, that's a big help too. The families are there with the employees, and that's part of it.
Our next bullet, mental health cost statistics. We've got hard numbers for 22 and 23 year to date. In 2022, PD and Fire ran 178 calls that related to mental health. As of June 21st, when we pulled the data year to date, we were at 79. So already almost at the halfway point, and we hadn't quite finished June yet. So as Chief mentioned earlier, these are, these kind of calls as the city grows, as our population grows, as do the calls for service. So those are our stats. The averages there is about 3 per week. So between PD and Fire combined, about 3 a week. Moving right on, public safety collaboration. PD and Fire handling calls, we like to think that we handle them based on patient response. So if a patient may be responding poorly to the officer in the room and responding well to the firefighter in the room, the PD is going to back up a little bit, and we're going to let fire take the charge. Now, we're not going to leave. We're going to maybe get out of the room, get out of sight. Any little tools and tricks like that we can use where PD and Fire, and of course the ambulance services that we may use, we all kind of have that understanding. If one particular branch of public safety is having better success dealing with the call and the patient, then that branch is going to kind of take the lead. If one branch is not, then that one's going to kind of back up a little bit. Chief, do you have anything on that?
The only time it gets difficult is when there's a child, someone that's maybe teenage, junior high level. That gets tricky especially when the parents are not there at the house, or there's just a relative there that can't, sign off on us transporting the child. So it gets a little tricky at times, but for the most part, we do kind of piggyback off each other and, watch the scene to see how we need to handle the situation. Questions?
Yes, I have
Go ahead.
a ton of them, really, but I guess the main question is, you talked about the mental health training that both PD and Fire receive. Is that annually? First question. And secondly, how has the training changed from last year or 2 years ago to now, given the increased calls? And is there a certain mental health diagnosis or that is more prevalent than the other?
Not really, but we try to train as much as possible throughout the year, especially as new employees come in. We want to try to make it part of the orientation because we go over things with our new employees when they get to the station, the type of calls we run. When we're training, we give scenarios, or sometimes we might bring in a professional person. Like our medical director deals with a lot of stuff. And he'll come in and train some of the departments in the South Fulton area.
Mhm. So that's for new recruits and new employee orientation. But what about ongoing training for, the fire employees specifically?
Well, absolutely. We do it on a regular basis.
Okay.
And if we have a call that is of some significance where it's the talk of the fire department for a few days, we'll do a debriefing on it and talk about what happened, that patient's history or what have you.
Annual training is absolutely required. Yes, the training is annual. It's required not only by our policy, but by our state certification standards that we participate in. So the policy review is part of the training. Additionally, we have this program called Virtual Academy, where the officers actually have to log on their laptops and go through this online training. And the courses range from 1 to 3 hours, and they're required to take those. We do at least one a year. Sometimes we do more than one a year.
Okay.
The second thing you said, training, how it's changed. The training has changed dramatically for PD in my 17 years. I don't even recall going through mental health response training when I was in the academy, and that was 2006. As opposed to today, where there's specialized courses, there's certifications you can get. The police department has certainly branched, not the police department, excuse me, law enforcement has definitely branched out into the world of understanding mental health better, understanding crisis situations better, and how we can be better at responding to them. Because I think a big component of that is that there have been some high-profile cases nationwide where police response in particular, usually not fire, but police in particular, have not responded as best as they could. So we want to make sure we're learning from those examples and making sure that we're not going to make a mistake that another agency may have made somewhere else in the country. So the training has changed dramatically in terms of the frequency and the detail and specificity of the training. The final part you mentioned was diagnosis more or less prevalent. On the PD side, this is more of an opinion than a fact, but usually anybody going through some kind of delusional episode where they're believing something or seeing something that's not there, that can be particularly challenging for law enforcement. I believe, again, I can't give you a diagnosis, but someone was in my office just last week telling me that they had a whole team of people following them around and spying on them in a whole situation. And so that is something we deal with pretty often. And again, that's more of an opinion than a fact.
Sure. Well, then that would speak to training that may be necessary as well. But I'll wait to hear Ms. Champagne's presentation. But please know, there's some follow-up that I'd like to have regarding how we're responding to our employees, all of the employees at various stages. And so, the wellness program, what things we can do to tweak that relative to it. And as we're getting ready to go into budget discussion for the next fiscal year, those are some items I'd like to see included in that, since this has become such a huge issue. And the coping skills that Ms. Pam, and I don't remember your last name, Ms. Pam, spoke about, but those are some things that we could really encourage our employees and help them with it, but we've got to create the environment and the opportunity for them to do so. So I'll be looking for that. Thank you.
Mr. Heath, and then Mr. Smallwood.
Yes, sir. Having been on the police department myself for 25 years, and sergeant's positions and in charge of the forces and everything, I saw a lot of drug abuse creating a lot of major problems, especially with the youth. There were people, male and female, but mainly male, that were breaking into houses to get money, to steal, to buy drugs with, and even prostitution, you know. And so I think a major thing that I saw in my 25 years was the fact of the drug traffic. And now we've got the drugs coming across the border that have actually killed over 100,000 people in the last year. So my thing is that mental health, yes, but I think a lot of it is a derivative of the drug trade. Like I say, I just saw it in my time in business, and Lightning used to be one of the focal points here in Fairburn. In Union City on 29 Highway, right across from the Dairy Queen, there was another drug area there. As a matter of fact, I had one call one night that a kid was shot, and supposedly he was a member of a gang that was working that area with drugs and everything like that. So he was supposed to borrow $50 from his parents. Well, they come and knocked on the door and asked for the $50, and he said, well, I hadn't had a chance to talk to my mom and dad yet. And all at once they pull a gun out, put it to his temple, and blows his brains out right there on the front porch of his house. So like I say, the drugs are a major issue. And I know that people are born with the defects, believe me. But sometimes they take these drugs to make themselves feel better, I think. And by the way, I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but it's just that my observation through my career, even working in Atlanta with MARTA for several years, that was just an eye-opener within itself that these drugs, the drug trafficking is everywhere. It's not just centralized in Lightning or across the street from the Dairy Queen in Union City. You know, it's everywhere, and millions and billions of dollars are made off of the sales of these drugs and stuff like that. And it seems like that, and I could be mistaken, but it seems like that, like our DEA and all that kind of stuff has kind of just relaxed and gotten back away from putting these people in jail. So I know that wasn't a question, but it was just that through my experiences, I've seen quite a bit, and most of it was dealing with drugs. And like I say, once somebody, some people were high on a certain type of drug, and I forgot what it was called, but like you would ask them a question when you were placing them under arrest. Well, they wouldn't answer you right away. But then you'd ask them another question, and that'd be answering the question you asked before. So, I mean, it's just like they're here physically, but mentally, everything is slowed down to them as using drugs. And I just feel sorry for anybody that's in that position. I really am.
Yes, sir.
Chief, when you respond, could you also include methane and?
Hold on, Ms. Jones. Ms. Jones, he still has the floor. He has the floor. Go ahead, sir.
But those are things that I wanted to bring to the forefront, because I didn't hear you mention that. I heard you mention about the mental stuff and the and about 5829s. You know, that is husband and wife fighting, or mother and son or daughter fighting, or wherever like that. So, like I say, I've just seen so much in my time doing that. Like I say, drugs to me seems to be a very integral part of that, and that's all I have to say.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Smallwood, you actually was next. Did you want to still talk? If not, Ms. Jones, I'll come back to you.
Well, I just wanted to ask, and it may be covered in the next slide, about you guys, I mean, you guys are trained to go and you see a lot, right? And so I was just wondering, because you did talk about it, and then council person, Ms. Jones spoke about it, about the coping too. What happens to, this is more of a question, what happens to an officer or a fireman who, after they see a tragedy, you know, the overturned tanker, people die and all of that, and especially if they're on a shift where they see multiple tragedies, what actually, just for me understanding, happens to them, or do they just go back on the shift the next day?
So that's a great question. I think from my own personal experience, and Chief, you can probably add to this as well, you don't really experience it in the moment. It's more of like after you get off work kind of a thing. When you're in the moment, your adrenaline's running, and we're trained to deal with stress and handle the problem in the moment. So we have that ability, most officers, firefighters have that ability to kind of process what's going on in front of you, get the situation handled first. Where we want to make sure, and as we're learning more and increasing our training and making sure we're getting better, is that we're checking on people after they get off work, not just that day, a week later, a month later. Peer-to-peer counseling is another big thing that I've learned a lot about. There's a lot of groups, I'm sure there's on the fire side as well, but there's a lot of law enforcement peer counseling groups. They have anonymous programs or non-anonymous programs where there's a phone number you can call or a website you can visit that will connect you to someone who is in law enforcement. Not even necessarily a medical provider, but because we do see a lot of that as well. Police officers are hesitant to talk about some of the mental stress they're experiencing with a professional or with their family or friends. But they are comfortable talking about it to another police officer.
Right.
So you've experienced, not experienced, but you've watched, you've seen something undescribably horrible, which they do. Police and fire, they do, I can assure you. You're comfortable talking about it at work with colleagues, so more of those programs are becoming more common. We actually just shared some information about a peer-to-peer counseling group because one of our sergeants was down in training at Forsyth and came back talking about this peer-to-peer counseling program he had heard about. So we were able to not only find that program, but add a few more to the list and get that list out to the PD. So those resources are there. So to go back to your original question, we do process things a little bit differently. Everyone does as individuals. But again, the thing to follow up on the most is after the fact, you know, a day later, a week later, a month later. Because that, when you experience a trauma like that, it doesn't just live in the moment. It can kind of come back. Yeah. You know, it buries little roots down in your head somewhere, and they'll spring up sometimes. So we have to address that.
And piggyback off Chief Pizzillo, we do the same thing. Every major structure fire call, accident with fatality, we always debrief, whether it's after the incident or that morning when they come on shift, the next shift. Believe it or not, y'all, we're getting so busy now, sometimes we can't even get the debriefing done that same shift because they're still running calls in the city. Wow. So, but we do debrief after every major call.
Okay. All right.
Ms. Jones, you had a question?
No, I just, I appreciate the history that my colleague, Councilman Heath, had given about the old Fairburn, and that we've done a lot to clean up Fairburn. So the descriptions you're describing, I don't think that's us today. But that begs the question of the crime statistics for the city of Fairburn. Do we have, you know, incidents like Councilman Heath have described? And I know we're running short of time, and maybe today is not the time to answer that question, but it does need to be answered because Councilman Heath has described a Fairburn that I don't recognize, and so I want to make sure that that is not who we are. So if you can provide that data for us,
Yes,
please. Thank you.
And the one question I had, having in this case been in personnel as a military person, that in this case where people got discharged for, they didn't call it mental, but that's basically what it was, My question to you is now, is there, if an employee is showing signs, in this case from a supervisor, and they refuse to help, more so not because they don't want to help, or because of, as you mentioned, embarrassed, or just believe for whatever reason that this will hinder my career if this is documented, that, can I ask, and maybe I guess you're the
It's
question
really
that
more
need to
Ms.
ask.
Champagne
Yeah.
to answer that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you kind of repeat your question, Mayor?
Yeah, my question is, if a supervisor sees, and I'll just use public safety for example in this case, and says you're exemplifying signs that fall within a protocol of a person that's having mental problems. My question is, if the employee refuses the help or refuses the treatment or the class, what's our standard procedure for that?
Well, we have not had an issue, at least since I've been here, where we've had an employee that has refused to get any form of help. I think that since the time that I've been here, working so collaboratively with city administration, we've tried to really improve and provide a work culture where employees feel safe,
Correct.
and where they feel like they can come to human resources and have a confidential conversation, and where they understand that they have not just their medical plan resources, but also free resources, not just to them, but also to their family members, and that they understand that that information is confidential as well. And so because of that, I can just share with you, as being the HR director here in such a short period of time, we've had an overwhelmingly amount of employees that have done just that. We really haven't ran into an issue. I would say, though, that if we do run into an issue such as that, we can't necessarily force an employee or mandate an employee to seek help unless we find that their behaviors is impacting their performance. And if their behaviors is impacting their performance, then that's kind of where myself, along with city administration office, will work collaboratively with that manager in getting that performance improved.
Okay. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any more questions?
She's still got a presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Will you be able to finish in the short time?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay.
So just quickly, I won't do the bullet points. I'll just provide you really a big overview. I would just say the short time that I've been here, I am super excited and proud of the work that we are doing here in the city of Fairburn, particularly with our wellness program. We have really built a very robust wellness program, so much so that in our last stewardship meeting that we had with our benefits broker along with United Healthcare, they have tripled our wellness dollars from $5,000 to $15,000 because of the work that they are seeing that we're doing here in the city as it relates to our wellness program. Our wellness program is comprehensive of many dimensions of wellness, and when we speak to mental health, we're not just targeting it 1 month, because May is typically Mental Health Awareness Month. We're looking at it throughout the entire year. So we're dealing with things with our city employees that can impact mental health, such as physical, such as their serious health conditions, such as financial, such as things with dealing with caregivers. So we have all of these things that are in place for them throughout the year. We literally just did a health event here where we saved lives. We did blood pressure checks. And we had about 80% of our employees that was in this room, standing room only, and we had employees in which we had to take to the hospital, and we saved their lives. And so for me, it's overwhelmingly, it is rewarding to be the HR director here and to be able to have the kind of wellness program that we do have in the city, where we really do provide our employees the tools and resources that they need to be successful. Small things that we're doing here in the city that has been very impactful. Policies. Our COVID policy that we didn't have before allows employees to now be able to take time off paid for by the city, that they're not have to worry about the financial impact that that may have because they don't either have the time to be able to take time off. The paid parental leave policy that we just did. 6 weeks of leave that families normally would not have the amount of time that they need to be able to just bond with their child or to give birth to their child. We've implemented that. Just recently, in May, we had all of these panel members that were here to include our EAP provider, United Healthcare, and we also had a member from our veteran environment as well. And we did a mental health panel discussion. We had employees right here in the council chambers. We streamed live. We had community members that were able to see it. And it was a fun, very rewarding event. And I would say the takeaway from that is from our city administration, we're saying, City of Fairburn is safe, it's confidential, and mental health is no different than if you have high blood pressure. We want you to get the help that you need, and we're providing you the tools and resources that you need to be able to do that. One quick thing that I do want to emphasize about our employee assistance program, we had an employee assistance program here for about 30 years, and we had never changed providers. Due to a tragic event that we had with one of our employees here, we saw just how stagnant that provider was. I worked very closely with our broker. We went out for bid. And not only did we get a great new EAP provider, we got a provider that specializes in counselors that deal with public safety. So when you mentioned earlier public safety that may have post-traumatic stress, that may deal with issues out on the street, and how do they deal with that? Well, we have counselors in our EAP program that deal specifically with that.
Great, that's great.
Mayor, if I could just add a couple of comments. One, I want to thank Ms. Champagne for her leadership in this area. She's done an amazing job. I want to thank both of our chiefs. We are very intentional here in the city of Fairburn about mental health awareness. It is not a month for us. It is something that we talk about ongoing, and we take all of the input from our elected officials to make what we do better, and we work in a continuous improvement environment. But I will tell you, we are as intentional about mental health awareness as any city you will find anywhere. We go out of our way to send a message to everybody that works in the city of Fairburn that we do not allow there to be a stigma. We do everything we can around mental health. In my personal experience, I firmly believe that it is probably the single largest barrier to people getting help, is that we make them feel ashamed, and we make them feel different. And that prevents people from getting to all of these wonderful resources that Ms. Champagne has worked so hard to put in place because of the culture we have allowed for years to exist. And so we have to be very intentional about changing that. And I will tell you that the example Ms. Champagne shared about the EAP provider, that EAP provider was gone shortly after we found out that they couldn't help our public safety staff. I told Ms. Champagne that day, do whatever you have to do.
Right.
They cannot service this city.
Right.
They can't help our public safety personnel. So we made that change very quickly. We are intentional about creating that environment. A couple of very quick things. When someone refuses help, Mayor, legally there's just not a lot we can do. And so we try to create the environment the right way so that that is less likely to happen. But when you're talking about adults, if someone says, I don't want help, I don't want to do AP, there's not a lot that we can do about that. Councilman Heath, you made a really important point about drug addiction, intervention, and all the crime-related issues around that, and it is every bit as impactful as you said it was. But I think we have to be very careful that we don't conflate drug addiction issues with mental health issues. I do know that there are times when they may overlap, but I don't want people with mental health issues being concerned that they may be confused with people who have drug issues. They're both important. We work hard on both of them. The chief will get our statistics so we can respond to that, Councilwoman Portis-Jones. But they're important issues, but they're very different. Because there are plenty of people with mental health concerns who've never done an illegal drug in their life. And that, I just wanted to make sure we keep those things clear.
Yeah.
We appreciate the council's advice and guidance and suggestions and things that we need to do to continue to get better. But we truly care about employees here, so.
And what happened, we're literally up against the clock now.
Yes.
We have to go into our meeting, because I was going to ask for at least 2 minutes. so that several, members, myself included, may have to use the restroom. Okay?
We
And
might
so-
need part two on this one, Mayor.
Yeah, okay, you'll probably need a part two, but we'll start our meeting at 3 minutes after the hour.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So don't go anywhere.
Great job.
And we're gonna get ready to bring our meeting to order. Actually, it's right at 7 o'clock,
Yeah.
I got 7 o'clock, yes, sir.
and Mr. Whitmore won't be here tonight.
Okay.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring our meeting to order. If anyone came in, please turn your cell phones or any mechanical devices you have to the silent position. Thank you so much. Ms. James, would you go ahead first and call the roll of City Council?
Yes, sir. The Honorable Mayor Pro Tem Linda Davis,
Present.
Honorable Hattie Portis Jones,
Present.
Honorable Alex Heath,
Present.
Honorable Pat Pallin,
Present.
the Honorable Ulysses Smallwood,
Present.
the Honorable James Whitmore.
Absent. Okay. Would everyone please stand? And our pastor didn't make it, so I'm going to go ahead and say a prayer tonight. You'll bow your heads. Father, we come before your presence with thanksgiving. We enter into your course of praise. We thank you that as we conduct business tonight in the city of Fairburn, Father, we thank you that we'll conduct it in decency and order. We ask that for all sound reasoning, all information, dear Father, that's been digested for the consideration of the council tonight will be done in decency and order. We ask, dear Father, we thank you finally for the protection of our city and our city government as a whole, and we plead the blood of Jesus over in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Next, we do not have any presentation this meeting. Next will be the adoption of the city council agenda. Members of council, you have a printed agenda before you. Is there a motion to adopt the city council agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Ms. James, is there anyone sign up for public comment?
Yes, I have 2 speakers.
Okay. Would you please go ahead and, let me get the rules. Okay. There'll be 30 minutes allocated for public comment. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. However, a speaker may transfer his or her 3 minutes to another speaker, but no speaker shall speak for more than 6 minutes. Issues raised at this time are generally referred to the city administrator for review, and responses will be provided at a later date. Would you please call our first speaker?
Sheree Freeman.
Ms. Freeman?
Good evening.
Good evening.
You want to speak in that mic? You can pick up that mic and speak in there.
Good evening.
Good evening.
City of Fairburn. We are citizens. I used to be an employee, but now I am a citizen. I live on Malone Circle, and this is my neighbor.
Good evening, everyone. I am Alicia Knox, and I live at 246 Malone Circle, and I'm here as well to speak on behalf of my street, Malone Circle. On May the 26th, I sent each one of you an email about my street, about the grass, how it was cut improperly, and about some other issues that was on my street, and I sent everyone an email. On a Saturday, on that next Saturday, on the 27th, Miss Linda Davis, I came to personally say thank you to her today because she took the time to call me, text me, and said, I will address your concerns. Because on the 25th, our grass was cut very improperly. It wasn't the way that anyone should cut someone's grass. None of you would wanted your grass cut the way they had cut our grass on our street. I have called several times, and it wasn't the response that I think that we deserve to have received. She told me that she would take care of it. She would come down my street and take a look of it, and I think that's what our public people should do, like you all should do, listen to our voice, and she heard my voice. I wasn't able to come last month because my mother was in the hospital, but I told her I will be here today to personally say thank you to her. Because she listened, because not only did it take care of me, it took care of everyone on our street. We had a hole that was on our street for about 7 years, and one of our neighbors passed away before it even got taken care of. But it all got taken care of in 1 month because of one email, because of one person moved the needle for that to happen. And I just want to say thank you to the citizens of Fairburn, to you all. I've been living here since 1992 on that same street. All of us have, and we're a family. And I just wanted to just come here and just to say that to y'all, just say thank you. And thank you also, Mayor Avery. You always, when I do see you on the street, you always are the same to all of us. You embrace us with love and compassion. And I'm a little emotional about it because I love Fairburn and I love my city. And I thank you, Miss Linda, for going the extra mile. And
our city
administrator, Tony called me as well, and he's told me he would make sure it was taken care of, and it was taken care of.
Yes.
So all of you worked together, but you pushed the needle for it to happen. Because when I called the regular number just to say, hey, street ain't cut right or whatever, I get different kind of feedback. So this time right here, I actually called Saray, said, hey, did you see our street, how it was cut? And I'm going to take pictures. I'm not going to just call. I'm going to take pictures and let you see my street and how it was. I'm like, pictures is worth 1,000 words. Let me take the pictures and let me see if anybody will want their yard cut that way. Wow. So I sent the pictures. You took action. Something was done about it. And I just wanted to say thank you and continue to love our Fairburn like we do. We are one big family, and we're full of love, and I just think that the people who work for Fairburn, they should love Fairburn like they live here.
Yes.
So that's what I got to say.
Thank you so much.
And I did work here, and I do love it. I would like to say thank you to Ms. Davis and to Mr. Phillips and to Mr. Martin. It was
Ms. Hicks.
truly spectacular. They came and cut trees that were on lines. They were very helpful. They went above and beyond. A tree fell on our neighbor's house, and she called the city, and the city said it was her responsibility, and it was, but the gentlemen were on the street cutting the trees, and they cut that tree off her house, and it was over her child's, her 10-year-old boy's room, and the window had been shattered. So I just want to say that in the city, we have had, I've been here since 98, and we used to have street sweepers. Some of you may remember that. They would come sometimes once a month, sometimes they'd come every 3 months, but they would come. And at the end of our block, there is gravel, because, you know, it drains downward, there's gravel, and so when you're going to step on your brakes, you're sliding almost into Rivertown, and it's very scary. My husband's been complaining about it for years. But I just wanted to ask if you all could look into it again, and also something for the children, 14 to 17. Idle Hands and Minds, our Workshop of the Devil, Crest Jewelers, that window was broken. You know, that wasn't nothing but teenagers because they didn't really, you know, steal much. And we need to make sure that our children understand what's going on and are connected with our police. You have PAL. We could get a Y over here. There are just so many things that need to be done for the youth. And we were talking before school ends and when school begins. I'm sorry, I'm going over a little bit. But
You got 1 minute.
They need to have, the police need to go in and let them know. We need to have alternatives for them so that they're not just roaming the streets and they're not out late getting into trouble.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you again. And y'all continue to listen to us and to hear our voices. When you get emails, respond, because it does make a difference for us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all. At this time, we'll go now to the next item, the approval of the city council meeting. You have before you, members of council, the city council meeting that commenced on June the 12th, 2023. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any corrections? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. We'll go to our next regular agenda item.
First item is a resolution setting the qualifying dates for the 2023 general election. We're requesting mayor and council to approve Wednesday, August 23rd, Thursday, August 24th, and Friday, August 25th, 2023, as the qualifying dates for the general election. The office will be closed between the hours of 1:30 to 2:30 for lunch each day.
Members of council, you heard the item before you stated by the city clerk. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments by council? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Next item.
Next item is Arts Advisory Board appointment. It is a request for mayor and council approval of the nomination to appoint Jared Wheeler to the City of Fairburn Art Advisory Board.
Right. Did you want to go ahead and introduce this first?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
I am excited about this. The Art Advisory Committee has been doing a phenomenal job. I'm excited to add another member to the team with a good level of experience that can really add to cultivating the already booming artistic community here in Fairburn. Mr. Wheeler, known as Rob Parker in the art community, has been an instructor. He is an artist. He's a branding specialist, and I think he'll add a lot to the team.
Right. Members of council, you had the item read by the city clerk. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and properly seconded. Any questions or comments by council about this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries.
Fourth item is a moratorium on mobile and modular structures due to the continued diligent efforts by staff to research revisions to Chapter 38, which is manufactured and mobile homes, Article 2, mobile and modular structures in the City of Fairburn Code of Ordinances. Staff recommends an extension of 90 days to preserve the status quo while the revisions are finalized in order to go through the legislative process.
Members of council, you've heard the item on the moratorium stated by the city clerk. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions by council?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Is this the item that we began discussion about because of the church and what they wanted to do?
Yes.
Okay. And is this a second moratorium?
It's an extension.
An extension? Okay. And we're asking for an extension because we did not complete what?
We're trying to give sufficient time to bring all of that information to council in case you need revisions, additional information. I want to make sure that we have time to really go through the entire portfolio of information that we've collected. Also, the church and the other developer that was interested in doing a modular building have both decided to do stick-built and traditional buildings. One of those items will be coming up pretty soon at the Planning Commission tomorrow.
Okay. And does this also address containers that we had talked about, or is that a separate, that would be under
It
a
will
separate
definitely be a
ordinance?
part of the discussion. That's why I wanted to give time to really kind of make sure that we all have an understanding of what modular versus mobile versus all the other different types of manufactured developments, to make sure that we're going in the right direction and kind of fit your vision for being both sustainable but also getting the architectural design standards that will kind of put the city in the right forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any other member of council? Go ahead, Mr. Heath.
I was of the impression that the last time that this was brought up, it was actually the first time, that we voted and it was approved. Is that not the case?
No, sir, there was a moratorium put in place.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
There were two applicants who submitted requests to do modular construction. One was for a kind of office building next to a parking trailer kind of community. Well, not a trailer community. It was for a business that helps with like transportation, and they wanted to do an office building, but they wanted to do a modular office building. And the ordinance requires that they go before council, and that request was approved with conditions. After the, yes, sir?
I thought we were talking about the church.
Well, it was two requests. So one was
There was two.
for the office building, and the other one was for the church, and both were approved, and both applicants have decided to do stick-built.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? And I was just gonna say, ladies and gentlemen, as it relates to why staff is actually spending the kind of quality time they are into this, because I won't identify coincidentally the neighborhood I rode through in another city, and clearly no consistency as it relates to standard materials, and what in this case where a neighborhood will at least look consistently. And one of the things that why this is so imperative for us, I'm personally concerned, is because with the booming housing that's going on, not just in the city of Fairburn, in the state, the truth be told, one of the things that the staff is very adamant about, for modular, whether it be modular buildings or whether it be housing or condos, there's a standard that you have to maintain if you're going to maintain the standard quality of life in terms of rental, whether you're renting or selling property. So again, this is just so imperative and as it relates to what we're trying to do and trying to raise our quality of life as well in our city. So you want to say something, Ms.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just want to add that staff has been really busy to provide updates to Mayor and Council. I know our July 24th work session agenda will be dedicated solely to planning and zoning. They have a number of updates that we need to bring before Council. This particular discussion will come back before you as a work session item at our first meeting in August, which I believe is August 14th.
Okay. May I have one other question? Do we have an ordinance regarding tiny housing, tiny houses? If not, is that part of the discussion, or is that a near future item to include? Because that's, there's a lot of pressure regarding building tiny home communities as well.
Very good question, Councilwoman Portis Jones, and it is a part of the discussion. Part of the reason for the moratorium is this is a more expansive issue than just the one that we dealt with when talking about the church and that particular structure. While I was at GMA, I participated in a workforce housing and housing leadership session, and there is a term that you're probably familiar with, Councilwoman Portis Jones, which is the missing middle of the housing market right now, and how we as cities go about addressing that. And it really connects not only to this issue, but a more expansive discussion around tiny homes, accessory structures, what all of those things, how are those tools utilized in various cities, and more importantly, in that work session, hearing from you as our elected leadership as to where you see that path forward in the city of Fairburn, because we've got to begin to define some of those answers, because different cities approach it in different ways. But no, we don't specifically have a tiny house ordinance right now that is distinctly a part of this discussion. It will also connect to some other related issues, and so that is part and parcel of why we felt it was necessary to provide a little bit more time for Ms. Brookins and her staff, along with Ms. Chris and myself, to really make sure we give you a holistic presentation on what those various options are, so that you can provide us with the feedback to go back and begin to craft the path forward around all of these issues under the umbrella of housing.
Okay, and then one last question. Is there, or will there be a difference in the ordinance for commercial modular versus, you know, if I wanted to carve one out for a home? Will the ordinance be different, or will it be the same?
Typically, the architectural design standards are a little bit different because commercial buildings have certain codes versus a residential home. And then there's also a distinction if you're doing sort of an accessory structure that would be similar in type to your principal structure. So all of those are good questions when we deep dive on that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Davis?
Yes, I was under the impression that we did have an ordinance for tiny homes. I know we discussed it with Ms. Peaks when Ms. Peaks was over planning and zoning maybe a year and a half ago.
So we have accessory dwelling units. We do have sections in the ordinance for that, but what we have not adopted is the appendix for tiny homes for building code purposes. And there is a distinction between a tiny home and a small
accessory dwelling
single,
unit.
yeah.
Okay.
All those definitions is
it's
kind of what I was.
different.
That's why we
Yeah,
want to give
kind of,
sufficient time to really
yeah,
explain
filtering
all of those
together.
differences, yeah.
I know we had a discussion about it maybe a year and a half ago.
And if I'm correct, I mean, I'm almost sure that the chairman of Fulton County Pitts actually brought that ordinance in Fulton County at this time, and I may stand corrected. I only know of one city that's actually considering it, and there's a mixed review. I'm just going to say some of the research I'm doing offline. There's mixed reviews between governments as it relates to what they're trying to do and how that particular aspect will actually impact the housing market. So I'm just being as transparent as I can about it. So
Well, I think that's exactly why we need to be clear about what it is that we want to do and what we want in Fairburn, that we need to get that on the books, whatever that is.
yes, ma'am.
And then one other question. I know that there was legislative discussion regarding rental communities. And I don't know if this is premature or not, but I just want to throw that out there, that we give some thought to how we might address, if we can at all, that issue. Because, I mean, we've been approached a couple of times about that, but I think we've made it clear that that's not something that we really want. But we need to have an in-depth discussion about that and be clear about what that means and what impact that would have on our community.
You make a really good point, Councilwoman Portis Jones. The term rental community, it's used to blanket all manner of different things. And I think we have to have a more nuanced discussion, a more detailed discussion. When you talk about the missing middle of the housing market, there are working folks who go to work every day and pay bills who literally cannot afford a home in this market. That's what the missing middle is about. These aren't people who are deadbeats. These aren't people who don't go to work every day and punch a clock and pay bills and take care of families. But that's what the missing middle discussion is about, is how do we as cities begin to accommodate families of good, decent, hardworking people who We're having a hard time finding that missing middle housing. And I think we need to have a holistic discussion that looks at all options. In years past, when people said rental communities, it did have a negative connotation, understandably so, because there are plenty of examples where it went south and did not do good things in communities. But we're in a different place today, and we simply want to present to you as elected leaders what all of those options look like in today's current market and what those solutions may best be in the city of Fairburn.
You finished?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking, that we really have that in-depth discussion, because the pressures are on us regarding that, and so we need to be clear about which direction we want to go.
Any other members of the council? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. At this time, I'll go to city council comments. I'll start with you, Mr. Smallwood.
I don't have anything this evening.
Okay, Ms. Davis?
Oh, yes. First and foremost, I want to thank Ms. Knox and Ms. Sharita? Ms. Freeman, for coming and sharing that. Thank you. But I have to extend that thank you to a lot of other people, especially our administration. When I shared that with Mr. Phillips, he actually got in his car and came down and looked at the street, took pictures, and lingered for a little bit so he could determine what departments that needed. Ms. Higgs, the street department, Mr. Martin, the utilities, all came together on a collaborative effort. And that's what we do here in Fairburn. And not just me, but my colleagues as well. We're very responsive. If I get it, they may miss it, or I may miss it, they'll get it. And we all work together, because it's just not one person that's doing everything. But I really appreciate you all taking the time out to come and thank us for what the city of Fairburn has done. And apologies, we've already done it, and Mr. Phillips have apologized to the neglect that happened on your street. And I can guarantee you that it will not happen ever again. So, but it takes a lot for our constituents to even come and say thank you. You know, and when you did it in the email, I said, just doing my job, you know, but we really appreciate your appreciation for what we do. I also wanted to thank Attorney Starkey for that fabulous dinner at Savannah at the Municipal Association Conference. I ate so much I couldn't eat for 2 days. That's why I didn't attend the one on Saturday night. I mean, he was feeding us some of everything. It was wonderful. Thank you from your firm to do that. I certainly appreciate that. And the other thing I want to say, Mayor, that Governor's Office of Highway Safety meeting was top-notch in every aspect. I appreciate how you brought citizens in to share information as it relates to the safety of our highways here in the city of Fairburn. And just appreciate the governor sending his entire staff, it seemed, to listen to us so we can talk about, you know, what concerns, what challenges that we're having here in the city of Fairburn. And they were very, very nice in reference to listening to us. And when we meet again, they're going to bring additional people, DOT and everything in there. So I was very impressed by that. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Pally?
I have thoughts to share, but no comments to make.
All right. Mr. Heath?
I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and just appreciate the fact that we have the opportunity to do things for within our city that a lot of other cities have ignored for so long. And I just appreciate the fact that we have a mayor and council that do care about our citizens, and we just give praise to God for everything that takes place in this city. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilwoman Portis-Jones?
Well, Ms. Knox, I want to say kudos to you for coming in and holding us accountable. We're human just like everybody else, and we don't always do everything that we're supposed to do at a particular point in time. But I appreciate your courage and making the statement and letting us know that you expected us to respond. And so I want to encourage all citizens to do just that, because we are here for you. And so you had every right to come and say what you said. I'm going to apologize, but we have excellent staff, and I knew that they were going to handle it. It's if staff is not responding, then that's when, I feel the need, I'll need to say something. But I know our staff will respond when they hear from the citizens, as they did. So, we can be assured for that. But I just want to thank you for your boldness, for holding us accountable. Secondly, I too want to thank the mayor for organizing the highway safety conference, where community meeting that include citizens as well as council. I think we learned a lot about what was going on and about highway safety and highway safety statistics as it relates to Fairburn. We do have some issues and concerns, and I think we expressed all of that with the governor's office, and that we, need assistance in getting some of those things done. Subsequent to that, Mayor, and I sent that to you and Mr. Phillips and Ms. Chris, part of my serving on the National League of Cities is to try and help identify resources that are available. Ironically, 2 days later, I get an email about a grant that spoke to just that issue. So I am pleased to hear that we're going to try and take advantage of that opportunity because of the Biden's, infrastructure bill, and there are a lot of opportunities there. So thank you for that, and I look forward to them coming back to our community, and that there are programs that they talk about that we want to share with the community about safety. And the one thing I want to say, to use this platform regarding seatbelts, it was an alarming statistic that seatbelts are not being used, and that the large percentage of the fatalities that happen is because seatbelts are not worn. Now, that's a law that's been around for at least 40 years, if not longer. And the fact that that is a #1 issue now, that is a serious problem. And so we need to do what we can do in our community to educate all of our citizens about seat belts and child, what do you call them? Yeah, child safety seats, another issue. I was glad our police chief was there and talk about our community policing program. So these are the kinds of things that we can do. And I just wanted to put that out there to let our citizens know that that programming is forthcoming, because we want to have an impact on a statistic like that. We need to correct that. With that, I'll close. Thank you.
Okay. And finally, just a reminder for people that are listening, our third Fridays concerts, please come. And as a lot of you all, I haven't seen you there yet. And I've gone to the different neighborhoods on weekends, and the city manager said, when I go to the neighborhood, the first thing I ask, I had seen you at a third Friday. So we're spending a lot of money trying to bring local and big name talent in our efforts to bring our community together. The events have so far been just phenomenal, and a lot of it has to do with the extreme professionalism and the hospitality of our staff. And I just really want to publicly thank our staff from the top to the bottom. Our facilities are remaining clean throughout the concerts and the whole 9 yards, so we don't take that for granted. I also want to just also mention, for any of you senior citizens, and I'm going to say 55 and up, would you please take time and go to the City of Fairburn website? There's so many senior programs. Ms. Scott is not here today, but we were blessed to get an email from Ms. Brenda Cooper that talked about the various programs that she's actually taking advantage of in her community. And so I'm asking, again, we're spending money in our efforts to make sure our seniors are not just sitting at home saying, there's nothing to do. And so, same with our youth. And so I'm asking you, would you please take time, go to our website, call Ms. Scott. Her staff will tell you, we have something for everybody. You play marbles or whatever, we got something for you. And so I just want to ask you in our efforts to continue to fund these programs. My goal is to make sure that they're actually being utilized. I want to also, again, as already been mentioned by Ms. Davis and Hattie Portis-Jones, in this case, the great Governor's Office of Highway Safety. I want to thank Director Alan Poole, who brought his entire staff. And I want to thank our department heads who were there, in this case, to answer some great questions. And so we're looking forward to a great partnership. I think our presentation was a little more than they expected, but it was very professional, and most of all, it was just a very constructive and positive meeting. I just want to publicly thank the CEO of GMA. The GMA conference was just nothing short of miraculous, in my opinion, from just quality classes to one of the best speakers I've ever seen that wore a military uniform, the general that spoke at the opening. I wish I could get him here. God, I do. I think I'm an ex-military and a war veteran. I've never seen a general speaking folks, half the folk in the room crying.
Yes.
He was just that phenomenal. And so again, we were just, want to just commend the CEO of Larry Hansen of bringing one of the best conferences I've ever sat through, having been both the U.S. Conference of Mayors and GMA and National League of Cities. That clearly was one of the best in terms of the speakers and the different courses. And then with that being said, as speaking of generals, I'll just be remiss if I didn't mention one of the biggest events that we have in our city is going to be up right here in our lap before it's all said and done, the Fairburn Fall Festival. Please put that in your calendar, the first Saturday in October. I'm excited, and I apologize, her name skips me, but I'm bringing a female general as a Grand Marshal along with Derek Bozeman. And so we're trying to bring community faces and name recognition in an effort to get the word out that the city of Fairburn is trying to make a mark in this region that'll be talked about for decades. And so with that being said, I will entertain a motion. We do not have an executive session, Mr. City Attorney. So I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.